Trump has canceled the jobs report because he knew that next month will be even worse than last month's. Between that and canceling 2 weather satellites, who, among other measurements, report CO2 data, it's clear what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to remove any headlines that could be bad for him. He doesn't want incessant bad news. The CO2 data every month is going to be worse. Jobs data every month is going to be worse, which will incite fear and pessimism and also opposition to his regime. So he literally just does not even want it talked about. And this leads me to the actual topic of today's video, which is the most important media bias most people never think about. And that is what topics are discussed in the news. You see, it's very easy to spot if they have like a very clear bias. They favor one side. You can read the article, you can see the bias, and you can kind of see, well, this person has an opinion, and you might disagree with it, or you might agree with it, but you can see what the opinion is, and you can form your own. But there's many topics, which when I'm talking with somebody about it, they literally haven't even heard of. They have no opinion on it. They don't know that it would be important at all because no one discusses it. And think about this. Think about how many times, for example, John Oliver, if for those of you who watch John Oliver, has done some segment, could be any other news source. Think about how before someone mentioned this topic, there was just no way, you would be very unlikely to even look it up to have your own opinion. And this is the biggest problem with the news. Reporters generally have a slightly left of center bias when they're, writing articles. But this sort of, begs the question, well, if that's the case, how come it seems so often when we read the news that they're talking about issues in a way that is bad for the left and also bad for Democrats? And this really boils down to they're selecting topics in which they know the Democrats' positions are unpopular and framing it in ways that they know are unpopular. And this is both because the actual people who own the news stations are conservative, but they've been conservative for a while. I mean, it is getting worse recently, to be clear, because the news media business is dying. But what this has done is both made the media cheaper to buy. So now if you're a rich billionaire, you can take advantage of your vastly increased wealth as a result of growing inequality to buy your own news station and pump out your own views. But concurrent with that, because the news media is a dying business, these journalists who, again, for the most part, maybe, kind of had their hearts in the right places, trying to work on spreading, awareness of certain facts, they have less job leverage, right? They can't just report on whatever they want. A lot of the decisions are made by the guys up top about what will be covered. I mean, this is what happened at the Washington Post. This is why several of the people on the opinion staff left, because I said, there's not a space for my voice anymore at the Washington Post because Jeff Bezos has made the decision that he doesn't want to piss off Trump. And so he's going to talk about free market economics and whatever, which, by the way, that actually would be bad for Trump. But the clear implication is he doesn't want to talk about what it would be like if we had a leftist government. Now, this is not to say that the bias of the reporter who's reporting something does not matter. And in this vein, it does matter a lot, too, that the specific voices, which are much more conservative or even fascist, are being amplified so much by the same kind of corrupt money that is polluting so much of our information ecosystem. Obviously, whenever Fox News starts talking about an issue and they choose to frame it a certain way, and the rest of the media kind of follows that, things like stacking the court, right? When Biden was president, we started talking about stacking the court. First off, I have no idea why we were talking about stacking the court instead of just doing it. But second, why call it stacking the court? Republicans have been stacking the court for generations. This is court reform. This is unstacking the court. This is having the court follow its intended constitutional role. That's what we should have called it, court reform. But Fox News called it stacking the court, and we all just decided to follow that framing for some reason. Super bizarre choice, by the way, by the Democratic Party. It was incredibly unpopular. We didn't end up actually doing it, so it got us negative press for nothing. So again, the framing of an issue does matter. But just as important is which topics the media decides to talk about, which topics they promote, which topics they decide should be thought of as important. Why were trans rights such a big issue last election? Don't get me wrong, I do think that protecting trans rights is important, though it should be noted that that's not the way the news media was talking about this issue. But it was seen as more important by the media to talk about a few transgender people who play professional sports than to talk about Trump openly threatening to detain in inhumane conditions and eventually deport 11 million people living in America, including U.S. citizens who are their children. I mean, there would be these long news segments about a single transgender swimmer winning some competition, or even not even winning, maybe placing fourth or whatever. There'd be long news segments about all this. And they wouldn't frame this, by the way, in terms of the medical consensus, which is that this is basically fine. There's not a lot of evidence that transgender athletes are significantly, overpowered compared to the people they compete against. But not only was it not framed in this way, but they didn't run hardly any segments talking to, for instance, U.S. citizens who are 15 years old, asking them, what would it mean for you if your parents got deported? There was none of that. None whatsoever. And that is essentially the cause behind the total lack of empathy in today's society, is that the media has decided to cover everything in terms of competition, which is inherently unhealthy and inherently lacks empathy, instead of covering the real people who are going to be hurt by all of these policies. This is one of the reasons why I keep saying maybe we just need to go out into the rural areas ourselves and talk to people. I'm kind of forming this plan in my mind right now of how I think we should go about it. I think that there are a lot of college students right now whose futures are realistically quite bleak. I mean, everyone else's futures are quite bleak if nothing changes as well. But I think for college students, it's especially obvious. And they're more well educated than most people, so they kind of know what's going on. And maybe we could just do the exact same thing so many other progressive parties have done, which is go to the college students and say, if you want a future, go out and talk to the people. Literally knock doors, canvass, put up flyers everywhere. Not just in, the universities, but like everywhere, rural areas especially, because those are the areas that can resist government overreach the easiest. And we need to be doing deep contacts with these people because they've been drinking propaganda for so long. And not just rural people, by the way. I want to make it clear that it's the entire United States. But it's especially stark in rural areas which have fewer options for, getting the news. Or at least have had traditionally. The internet has obviously equalized things a bit, but for a long time, the majority of news sources available in rural areas were biased a certain way. And I don't see a good way of overcoming that kind of systemic misinformation repeated over decades without having some kind of deeper connection to the people that we're trying to reach. I mean, publishing, I think we do need our own outlets, and we do have a few that are doing a really good job. Obviously, it's really important to have some reporters that are working for us, and we should donate to those causes and those newspapers and subscribe to them and try to encourage the work they're doing, because it is really important to have our own sources of information which we can share with people and read ourselves. It's also really important that we can actually reach people outside of our kind of bubble with that information. And the best way to do that probably is some kind of in-person contact. Putting up flyers in their area, talking to people, holding our own town halls where we talk to people about their issues and how Trump is negatively affecting them. If you guys know any organizations that are doing a really good job with this sort of outreach, I would love to hear about them. I do know of a couple kind of leftist organizations which are obviously doing really good political work. I haven't been able to find one that I really like that is specifically doing outreach to, I think, the kind of people that we need to reach now that the prevalence of government overreach is so pervasive in society that more radical measures are needed. So let me know if you've heard of one that I should investigate. As always, the best antidote to pessimism is activism. Even if it doesn't succeed, we'll know we tried, that we did the right thing, that we tried to help people.